dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. First of all, I want to thank Dylan, who has been an amazing boss and put my employment on hold while I just dropped everything and ran down there to see what I can do. And also my family over here, who I also dropped everything and ran down there. And so I appreciate everyone's patience as I do what the Spirit has moved me to do with this process. So I just learned a couple of days ago that Hurricane Helene was considered by the United States Geological Survey to be a global event, which is kind of an extreme title to call a hurricane. It really means that the damage done is pretty irreparable and has left a scar on the earth that will be there for generations to come. This was a picture. Most of these pictures are pictures that I've taken, but I've also grabbed some from friends and things from other people's Facebook pages that sort of illustrate the point I'm trying to get across. This was taken from a helicopter as Helene was dumping rain on the mountains. 30 plus inches of rain fell in many areas in western North Carolina. There were over 1,000 landslides just in western North Carolina that have been counted thus far. 6,000 miles of roads destroyed. Let's get that on there. So this is a map of the debris flows, which is another name for mudslides, and it's a more graphic and more concise title for exactly what happens here. When you think of a mudslide, you're just thinking of mud like chocolate pudding running down the mountain, but this had trees, and it had rocks, and it had mud, and it had water, and it had everything, and eventually it had houses. And you'll see from some of the pictures that I've taken that all of this stuff would build up on bridges and overpasses and stay there and dam up until it could push past that and then create just an incredible amount of water all at once that would then go to the next area. And then that would happen again. It would just be this incredible chain reaction of destruction. Over 100,000 homes have been completely destroyed. That's completely destroyed. That's considered condemned by FEMA as of today.
Is that just North Carolina?
That is in the whole area of Helene's destruction. Over 200,000 people have been affected by the aftermath in 4 states. And $250 billion in damages. Think about that number for a minute. $250 billion in damages.
Doesn't that make it the largest, most destructive hurricane in U.S. history?
I think they're still assessing that, but I think that's what it's going to come down to.
I think what's the one that hit New York?
Sandy?
Sandy, yeah. I think that was something like 240 billion.
Yeah. So on October 1st, we started getting these pictures coming out of western North Carolina of some of the destruction early on social media and through the news. My in-laws had not been heard from for 3 days, and finally we got this weird cryptic satellite phone number. It was a text saying "we're fine" or something like that. It was very strange. There was no communication coming out of western North Carolina at that time. I reached out to 5 of my buddies and I was like, "Hey, y'all want to go down? Like, let's load up the truck and go down." It was crickets from everybody. And then this guy, Brian, who just graduated from physician's assistant college in Lynchburg, randomly texted me and he's like, hey, I've got 10 days. You want to go down? And I was like, oh my God, thank you. I really wanted to go down to Silo to check on my in-laws, make sure they were fine, allow Hannah to have her mind rest at ease because she was crawling up the walls trying to get in touch with them. We threw stuff on Facebook saying, hey, we're heading down. If you want to donate some stuff, we're gonna load up a truck and head down there. And we didn't have, we had a destination, but we didn't have a purpose at that point. And so we just, you can see in the back of the truck, I've got shovels and rakes and, we've got water bottle. We had 40 gallons of fuel and camping supplies, and just having no idea exactly what we were going to get into. And we headed down there. As we were going down and trying to figure out exactly how to get to Silo, this was something that I kept pulling up. As you can see, this is north of Asheville, but you can see if you went to a certain height on your maps, all of a sudden everything would turn red, and you would see just how many places you would not be able to pass to get around. And this is just a screenshot of that area. It took 6 hours to make a 3-hour trip down to Silo just by dodging different roadblocks, going around fallen trees and mudslides as we were making it down there. So Yancey County, you can see Yancey County here is in the red, just to sort of give you an idea of where our destination was. And I'm going to be talking about a couple of these places here, but South Toe is where Silo is. Silo is this sweet little Quaker community where Hannah grew up, and her parents still live. Kind of an artist community, kind of Floyd-like. And so they're in the South Toe region down here. I'm also going to be talking about Ramseytown and Pensacola. Two areas that I ended up going to. So here's a water map of Yancey County, and you can just see how much water is in Yancey. Most of the destruction were on the main waterways. The Cane River is a big one that goes through there, but the South Toe River was also sort of coming up from the south. I'll get into that. So we got into Burnsville, which is the county seat of Yancey County. And the Cane Creek is actually crossing right there. We weren't exactly sure what was going on, but this was probably the first traffic jam in Burnsville. It was open to one lane that we were having to go around and just really not knowing what to expect. So as we were driving down, my buddy Brian got in touch with a doctor whose parents own a huge manufacturing company there, the Tillies. And it's called Alltech, and they started that immediately as a staging ground for supplies and hot meals. They had a huge parking lot. It had already gotten flooded, but they just went ahead and cleaned it up and made that like the first depot for supplies to come in. Helicopters were landing, and it was a pretty vibrant area. So that was actually where we were going while it was still daylight, to sort of establish connection and see what we could do. We got there, we got some hot meals, and we made our way towards Silo. So we got to Silo, visited Hannah's parents, and they were doing great. They were in this little bubble of security. They were having dinner by candlelight behind their house. But it was truly this bubble where right across the street from their house, a woman got swept away in her car and unfortunately perished. So like they had this amazing little spot of security. They were fine. We could establish that as kind of a place to sleep, and we moved on. So the next morning, we found ourselves at South Toe Rescue Center, just to kind of see like, hey, we've got some medical stuff here. I've got a chainsaw. Where do you want us? And these guys were all standing around in the fire and rescue, just kind of staring at the wall, and like it really drove home how shell-shocked everyone was. These guys hadn't slept in 4 days. They had been out looking. They were worried about their relatives. Most of these guys are from there. All of their people are there. And they directed us to Burnsville. They were like, you know what, we're fine. Go up the mountain, see what they need. So we get to Burnsville, where there's already a field clinic established, and there was a doctor there, and he's like, hey, we need a couple of more field clinics set up. There's one at an elementary school. Go see if they need help, and they'll tell you what to do. Everyone's just overwhelmed. Everyone's super tired. And again, this is just 4 days in. So we made our way to the elementary school. They were thrilled to see us, and they said, there's a middle school right next door, Cane River Middle School. We need to set up a geriatric facility there. Take these nurses who are also kind of waiting, go there, set up a triage and an examination room, and we're also going to have a shelter come. So we went over there and set up the teacher's lounge as that. So here is the teacher's lounge. And we had this wonderful group of nurses that had a lot of medical supplies. We also were able, as we were leaving town, we grabbed a bunch from the Floyd Fire and Rescue, and then stopped by Portia at the Floyd Pharmacy, and she gave us what she could to get started with, and that sort of got our foot in the door. We're like, oh, you got some good supplies. So that was nice. So this was the triage area. We also had these beds set up, for examination for people to come. And then the National Guard showed up and amazingly set up. These are the home of the rebels, by the way, at Cane Creek Middle School. This was the geriatric shelter they set up. And they were able to set this up and make it all pretty within like a half an hour. It was incredible. These huge trucks showed up, and then they were gone. And just as we were starting to accept our first patients, the Red Cross showed up, and they were just like, "We got this." And we were like, "Okay." So we moved on. We went back to Burnsville. We were like, "What do we do now?" And they said, "Go to West Yancey Fire Department. That's kind of the staging ground for more of these clinics. See if they need your help." So we went there, introduced ourselves, told them what we had already done. We could do this again anywhere that they needed. And they said, show up tomorrow morning and we're going to put you on assignment. And we really didn't know what that meant. So I'm kind of amazed that I had the wherewithal to take pictures this whole time, honestly, because things were changing every 5 minutes. And, we would be put on something and then get removed from it and get put on something else. But the whole time I'm just in awe and kind of soaking this in, like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, what has my life turned into? But this became a huge hub for donations and for all the volunteers at the beginning were all coming here for the first week. This was a main spot for communication. One thing to think about is there was no cell service. You get up into these hollers and there's no CBs that work. There weren't repeater towers for ham radio to be really effective. So nobody really knew what was going on the further reaches of these areas, and you could tell that people were really worried because, again, this is their people. This is where their grandparents live. These are where their aunts and uncles and kids have moved to. So we teamed up to go to this area called B-Log, and you can see again these roads have been either washed out or there's things across. They're somehow impassable. So this is going into the northern part of Yancey County. So we start gathering and getting put on teams, and they are kind of pointing out who everybody is. A group of men with these semi trucks full of these Polaris Raptors showed up. These Mad Max type 4-wheel drive vehicles that like way cooler than a side-by-side, but they can go literally anywhere. They've got winches on them, and whatnot. So we teamed up with some of these guys that had side-by-sides because that was their credentials. They had side-by-sides. They were the vehicles to actually get into these places. And I had chainsaws. I had no other credentials other than like I'm a willing person, but I was with the medical guys, so they got my foot in the door. So we teamed up with the drivers, and then they introduced us to the cadaver dogs. That's them. So this is Ramsey Town, the B-Log area, and you can see the Cane River off on the right there. And this was kind of my first introduction to some of the damage. You can see the dogs working in there. They would sort of move along the river as, you know, I mean, you can see there's parts of houses in here. There's, you know, riprap. There's road. We grabbed our partner, loaded up, and our job was to go do wellness checks as these roads were just starting to get reestablished. You know, these good old boys with backhoes would take the equipment from their companies and actually just go and, you know, employment be damned at that point. Like they needed to you know, pull these people out. So they were repairing these roads, and you'll see. Let me see if I can get they would be. This is sort of from the vantage point of where a track hoe would be, and it's just trying to shore up like a pig path that we could get along, so that, you know, less than a 1-lane road right up against the side of the mountain, so that people could at least walk in and out. Luckily that we had those Polaris. This was a main bridge that went across the Cane River here, that obviously got incredibly destroyed. But here's a good example of when these mudslides happen, these flows, and the debris just piles up until it can't go any further. It goes over until it can actually breach the bridge, push it aside, and keep moving. There's another shot of that same bridge. So the fire department is in the background there. That's the Ramsey Town Fire Department, and I've got some stories about them, and I'll come back to them in a minute. Again, you can see trucks and whatnot in here. So this was this river was about 20 feet across on September 26th. And as you can see here, it's easily, you know, 50, 60 feet across at this point. Even with the tracos that are now trying to put the river back in the bed, it will never be the same, and it's incredible. And I'll show you some pictures of, like, their version of putting it back in the bed is a very straight river. It's going to be a bad idea. So this is our Ramsey Town Fire Department. So there were 3 firefighters that were on call the evening of the storm, and the water rose. You can see the mud inside this fire station. The water rose, and as it rose, they got on top of the fire trucks, and it was very obvious. So this is along the river. As the water got on top of the fire trucks, they took one of the axes and cut a hole in the roof, and they spent the night on the roof in the storm, and they made it. But they lost a fire truck in the process, and they still have not found their fire truck, and it's probably under the silt somewhere. It couldn't have gotten washed too far down, but it is missing in action. And I just heard yesterday that a fire truck has been donated to Ramsey Town in I think it was out of Western Tennessee or somewhere. Someone had it. This was a brand new Toyota, and you can just look at the way that the roots and everything are just intertwined within this vehicle. It was mesmerizing to just see the power of the water here. This was a convenience store right where that bridge was. That Hannah, you been to a couple of times, as I recall. But that's all that was left of it, and everyone's just kind of scratching their heads, just going like, "Wow, what happened?" And you can see this is fresh. Nothing's been moved here. There's hardly any footprints in this. Like nothing's been touched at this point because everyone's still just in shock. Let's see if I can get this to play. Okay, so this is going on that little pig path right along the Cane River. So you can see the bridge, you can see the fire department. And we're going to a community called Little Creek, which is where we're going to give wellness checks to all the folks that have not been contacted in 5 days at this point. Again, look at how wide the river is. There's houses on the other side that they can't even get to at this point. And you can see what these fellows have done to just carve out something on the side of the mountain for us to get down. So we had 6 of these raptors going. How do I get out of here? That's the same one. So our job was to go to the very top of the mountain, break into groups, and one take one side of the road, one take the other side of the road, go knock on doors. Another thing to mention, everyone's packing heat. Everyone. And I was even given a pistol because you don't really know as you're knocking what's going to be on the other side of that door as far as trauma. Opioid addiction, people experiencing withdrawal. Alcoholism was a big one. They were worried more about alcoholics than they were about other drug users. Actually, people just coming off of it, being volatile. We didn't experience any of that. Everyone was incredibly nice. We would have to go up, if there was a dirt road, we would have to go up as far as we could on that road just to see if there was a dwelling up there. And especially if there was a power line, that was usually an indicator that there was something up there. And these were the kind of places that you'd find way up, like past where you're like, there's definitely nobody up here. And here's a woman, we actually saw that she had oxygen tanks. You can see one on the right-hand side there at her door. The door was propped open like this. There were dogs running around. And she needed to be medevaced out. So we had to take her name, have somebody stay with her, write it down on a piece of paper, send one of those raptors back to the fire station to then go all the way back to West Yancey to have a helicopter come and get her. And that was the way. She was 400 pounds. She wouldn't have fit in the, yeah. Sweet little honey cabins, just walk away. Mule teams. So as it turns out, mules have a purpose in today's world, and they were pack teams that would come in and get to the places where nothing else could get to at that point. This really opened up my eyes to the fact, and there were hundreds of these teams all over, at least Western North Carolina, that were participating in this effort, and they were incredible. And I mean, just amazing animals carrying loads and loads of stuff. So these would have water, medical supplies, meal rations, anything that they needed. So at one point while we're in Ramseytown, it happened to be the day that Joe Biden was flying over in the helicopter to survey the damage, and we actually saw his helicopter fly over. And as you can imagine, they have to ground all the other relief efforts while Air Force One's flying over. that wasn't a great political move, in my opinion, because it actually stopped everything. Everything just had to be grounded. So of course there's like expletives and everything like that, fingers being raised towards the helicopter, and then that one goes away, and then all of a sudden this other one comes along, this one, and they go, I bet that's Trump. He's come to save us. And I was like, that's not Trump. But it wasn't. It was totally Samaritan's Purse, and they were coming down to actually help with every bit of this the woman out. But what was so nice and refreshing was that all political leanings melted during this. You know, I was definitely hanging with a guy who could have stormed the Capitol, and he was my survival link. Like he was my guy, and that it was refreshing. So another fun thing that I got to do, and I'm not a techie person at all, but I got to set up a Starlink in this area, and that gave everybody within the community a tag to the outside world to let their families know that they're okay. I looked around for the nerdiest guy I could find, and it was this guy, and I was like, you are going to help me set this thing up. And all of this stuff is donated. You know, we were able to get all the equipment that we needed. You know, no one was exchanging money for anything here, including that Starlink. Oh boy, what's this video going to be? Okay, so back to this donation center. So this is right there where that bridge is knocked out. You can see the dust and silt in the air. This is the nurse on staff right here, and these folks are trying to, like, scratching their heads here, trying to figure it out exactly what to do. Meanwhile, heavy machinery's moving through, dust is getting kicked up, there are kids in the street, and we convinced them to divide up those rations, put half of that in Little Creek, that area that we went and checked out, just in case that road got washed out again, which it more than likely would if we had a heavy rain, and take the other half and put it in a church that was further up the road, the B-Log church, to keep it secure, so that, you know, rations could be doled out and nobody would be hoarding things and whatnot. So this is that effort of actually going back down that road that I showed with the raptor and everything. Hay was being donated, which was another thing I wasn't quite thinking about. Dog food, you know, baby food, Huggies, you know, kind of anything you could imagine that you could get from Walmart, we were bringing in. And this is the clinic that we set up in the B-Log church here. National Guard showed up right as we were getting things set up to help. But this was the inside of the sanctuary here, which was kind of fun. All the medical stuff was on the altar, which I thought was a lot of fun as well. And people could come in and grab what they needed and go, but we were able to lock it up in the nighttime so that a lot of these supplies weren't again hoarded. So that was a big day. When we went back to West Yancey Fire Department, they were like, all right, boys, y'all come back tomorrow and we'll send you to Pensacola. It's like, oh no, here we go again. But that's what we did. Same kind of situation, getting together. So one thing, as things were becoming a little more organized, we started having to do a sign in and sign out, just so that people that actually would go out on these missions would actually come back and have to sign out their name. This, you know, it was kind of neat seeing little bits of infrastructure slowly coming back, because there was nothing at the beginning. I mean, watching, even in West Yancey, watching the fire chief kind of scratching his head and staring at the wall and not really being effective as a leader. And, you know, I know he had his stuff going on. He hadn't slept either. But it was hard, you know, as relief teams were coming in, appointed by the state, trying to give this guy pointers on exactly how to approach the disaster, and he wouldn't listen to them. Sent them off. They actually ended up going home. These were problems that were happening throughout, and so there was a lot of communication issues. But this was nice to see, like, okay, like they're actually a little concerned about like where we are, what we're doing. So you can see Burnsville at the top here. So we were going south this time into Pensacola, which I always just thought was a place in Florida, but as it turns out, this is lovely, or once lovely valley. Where we were trying to go was Satellite Mountain Road, which was an area that had not been contacted. And we were to do wellness checks again. They knew that there were at least 2 cancer patients on the road. And if you think about all the different variables here. Cancer patients, they need electricity to do what they do. You have people on dialysis. You have all these different health issues, people that need their medication, and we needed to find out exactly who they were, what they needed, and how to get it to them. An amazing thing that one of these boundaries that was definitely lifted, that the red tape, was that we were allowed to take pictures of their pill bottles and bring those back to the fire station, and their pharmacies would refill those prescriptions immediately. That was amazing. That kind of stuff is. So we started going, and it's a lot of the same damage. This is also the Cane River, and it's a different part of it. This is where I really started seeing the mudslides, though. Let's see if we got this. It was a lot of devastation. And again, we had the cadaver dogs here, and they were hitting here like they were not at B-Log. And so think about this river, like it got in this spot where it's nice and broad like that, it got 15 to 20 feet high, and some places it got 30 feet high. The river just rose 30 feet out of its banks.
So when those dogs found somebody, did you have they got pulled out? What was that process?
The question is, when the dogs found somebody, would they get pulled out? And yes, we would actually call for a medic team to come and help with the extraction. The dogs, it's interesting because these were like these Rhodesian Ridgeback kind of dogs, and so I was expecting them to bark or like get all excited, but they would just stop, and their hair would rise on the back of their neck, and then they'd move on. And you'd be like, what was that? And so, you'd have to go and look around, and, as that would happen, of course, we still don't have communication, so we would have to get to the Pensacola fire station, have a medic come. And, speaking of that, there was looting going on, especially in this Pensacola area, and a lot of residents would have to discharge their firearms in the air to scatter the people that are casing houses. And I was talking to a sheriff back at the station, and I was like, this is going to be bad. Like, there's going to be somebody shot if y'all aren't careful. And he's like, oh, it's fine. Look, we've got 6 sheriffs, and they're all at the fire station. I'm like, but you need to have them lined up. And they're like, well, we'll just get a call if there's an issue. And I was like, well, okay, all right. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but what was this video? I wouldn't even watch it. Oh yeah, so this is more of the devastation here. And so anytime there was a vehicle that was turned over and obviously hadn't been checked out, we'd have to stop everything and go and just make sure that it was empty. You can see we spotted one in this one right there. So we had spray paint, and so when we'd finish a whole street, we'd put spray paint at the bottom, or a driveway, we'd put a spray paint at the bottom, and then cars like that, trucks like that, we would also put an X down. These videos really don't do it justice. What the smells, being able to see this all around you, this destruction like a bomb had gone off. It was overwhelming, and I'm still processing a lot of that right now. So here are some of these debris flows coming up, and let's see, is this the one? I think this is the one where you really get a good shot at like one of these things just coming down the mountain. One of the major problems right now is that a lot of these debris flows, these mudslides, sort of half fell and have stopped. And everyone's just kind of sitting there waiting, like, is that going to be stable? Of course it's not. You know, there's nothing holding the rock, the mud, the roots to the ground at this point because it's shifted so much. And there are villages, whole villages below those, and the people refuse to leave because they don't want their land taken away from them. And that's a very real fear, and some of it's based on conspiracy, but some of it's very real for their own safety, and there are people that just will not leave, and it's a problem, and it's happening right now, and all it's going to take is a big rain to kind of test these spots.
So none of them have fallen yet, the ones that were hanging there?
But we haven't had a big rain, you know?
Think we will?
Pardon?
You think we will?
Eventually. Something's going to happen. So here's a good shot of one of those debris flows, and so you can see where it starts at the top of the mountain. And oftentimes it would start low, and sort of fall off, and then a middle section would fall, and then the upper sections would fall, and 5-6 days later, this is what you see, and it's kind of hard to fathom what was there, but it was most definitely this amount of soil that you're seeing on the other side. This was not a creek bed or anything. It's obviously dry. It was that amount of soil that came down into the river and then got pushed down with these raging torrents. So let's talk a little bit about some of the fun organizations I got to meet. The Cajun Navy. So when these guys showed up, I was like, oh boy. They have been amazing. These guys showed up. So these were the guys from Katrina that were like in the airboats, and they would go out rescuing people in the bayous. And they were just, again, good old boys doing their thing. This is what they know how to do. They knew all these bayous. Well, they've since organized, and they have helicopters. They have dump trucks. They have backhoes. They have anything that you need and a lot of money. And they've been helping out, and they're still there, and they're cooking meals, and they're doing everything, and not expecting anything in return. And they are definitely one of the big heroes in this. And there's 3 factions of the Cajun Navy, and it's funny because there's definitely been like schisms in between them. And so like Cajun Navy 2016, they're like, don't talk to the United Cajun Navy. And I'm like, come on, why can't I talk to the Cajun Navy? And we don't like them. But then there's Savage Freedoms, which Savage is a fellow's last name. It's not how they act. They're actually pretty great, and they're bringing a lot of large equipment in as well. Which is one of the most important things right now, just to move things aside, get houses. If houses need to be demolished, these houses can be demolished by those folks. But also just getting supplies from one place to the other. So they have flatbed trucks and trailers. They have dumps. And I've been able to call both of these organizations for so many of as people approach me, tell me their story, and I'd be like, let me just make a couple of phone calls. And I've been able to get helicopters landing where I need them to land. I've been able to get dump trucks places and Tracos places. And I found myself in this interesting position because I don't represent an organization. It's given me a lot of freedom to kind of move about and befriend all of these and ask favors from them And because I'm not tied to anyone, they're all about it, you know, because they get the credit, I don't get any of the credit. So there's a little bit of that ego going on as well. But whatever it is, I'm thrilled that they're there. World Central Kitchen, they're still providing tons of meals. We had folks actually from Floyd that went down there to help them cook, and they show up in disaster areas. And yeah, their food's actually pretty good. I thought I was going to get fat doing this because of all the delicious food. Let's see what I got here. Oh yeah, so this is kind of the end of part one of this this presentation. So this was kind of like, I'd done kind of some crazy stuff. I'd seen some things and I needed to rest and I needed to come home and like hug my family. And these were Cajun Navy guys right down the street from where Hannah's parents lived, and I got to meet them, and like I was able to come back to Floyd and just take a deep breath for a week and get my head on straight. I didn't see my family for most of October doing this work, and it became sort of a fog, like day in and day out, like waking up and just being like, do you really want to do this more? Like, and then you're like, yes, you got to do this. Do it until you can't. And that's so this graphic came up on social media showing just sort of what happens during a disaster as far as sort of the consciousness of you know, the collective. You can see that this can last for up to a year of disillusionment before you start really getting into the reconstruction. And I think I think we're on the disillusionment right now. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. There are a lot of players in this, and I don't think we've quite gotten to the trigger event. So we're kind of on that downward slope right there. I think that I was probably doing the heavy lifting during the heroic era of that, and now that the weather's getting cold, we're definitely getting into the disillusionment as morale is going down. So when I came back to Floyd and kind of scratching my head and being like, okay, like I'm definitely not a medic, like I can't go back there and do what I was doing because they're getting more organized, and they started asking for credentials and I didn't have them. Like, how can I plug myself in that feels good? Like, what needs to happen here that is what's not being addressed? And I started thinking about, as Milton was approaching Florida at this point, what's going to happen when all these donations run out? You know, everything's going to go down to Florida. Florida's sexy, you know, Florida's flat. They can see the damage. You can't see the damage. So I started thinking about distribution hubs and how we could start aggregating supplies, making sure that nothing gets turned away from Western North Carolina and the other affected areas, that we could put all these things in large warehouses and hold them, and then slowly work them out to the smaller distribution centers. There's also the issue with fresh water. So just yesterday, Swannanoa and Asheville, it's been declared, have drinkable water. I've seen pictures of that water, and I wouldn't drink it. But people are very excited. This is a big step. There was I think there were 4 line breaks in Burnsville when they turned on their water yesterday. Just guys are shooting up into the air. So it's still a big mess. This is a company, and I think they're actually out of Asheville, and they've been donating these amazing water filtration systems. So you can actually, this can take care of about 100 people at a time. Schools are using these right now as they go back into session so that they can have potable water for the kids to drink. These containers have become incredibly popular over there for larger areas, especially in Asheville Central, for people to just come draw off of And there's usually two of them, one that's potable and one that's non, so that they can just flush the toilets with before they had running water. But they're also using them to transport fuel. You see a lot of them red with diesel and other dyed fuels that people can pull off of. Incredibly, there haven't been any accidents that I know of. So I've been looking at this map, and this was an incredible effort early on. On October 20th, this map came out, and it was a very user-friendly map that showed where the shelters were, where food distribution was, where there's fresh water, where there's Wi-Fi signals, where there's showers, where there's baby needs, and you could zoom in, and it would give you specific instructions on exactly where those places were. Well, this map got outdated really quickly, and I got in touch with the developer, and he was out of money and scratching his head on trying to figure out exactly how to make ends meet. And I had raised a bunch of money just through my my Facebook, $30,000 actually, just in like $50 to $100 donations here and there, by people who can't afford to donate, which was the most incredible thing, and people were still giving money, and so I'm incredibly thankful. But it allowed me to be like, hey, Alex, like, this is what you do best, like, make this happen. So this is as of today. I took a screenshot of the updated map. So this required getting together with a network of Burning Man volunteers, which is a thing, and getting them to call all the sites all over Western North Carolina and Tennessee and parts of Virginia, and are you still open? What do you need? Who's your point of contact? Correct address, blah, blah, blah. So this is as of today, this is the redone map, which was a fun feat to do. So back to mid-October, when I came back, I was like, okay, so I need to start looking at these distribution centers. I keep hearing about beloved Asheville, which was started before this disaster happened, but they had really stepped it up during the disaster and really made a name for themselves. And I went out there and checked out their scene, and though it was thriving, they're sending deliveries out to everywhere. Everything was outside. Everything. You've got plastic water bottles just baking in the sun. You've got medical supplies baking in the sun. You've got baby food just sitting there getting hot. And I was a little appalled by it, and I went and talked to the people in charge. I was like, can I find you guys a warehouse and like actually house some of this stuff? And they're like, yeah, whatever. Well, I did. Here's kind of an example of what my vision was. So you've got these small hubs, and then you've got the larger one that can actually hold all the stuff until the things are actually needed. As the evolution changes, the needs change, so can, the deliveries that come to these smaller places. So I started looking at warehouses. This is a tile company that had just opened up in Mills River, which is kind of near between Brevard and Asheville. And so I started talking with these guys, and I was so excited about what we could do. I mean, they had 10 loading docks. We had all that space, all that shelving, the vertical shelving, which would be so incredible. We had access to forklifts. Everything looked great. And then I started getting calls from these guys. So this is another element of all of this. We've got militia groups that have come in trying to be benevolent, bringing supplies, and they are. They're actually taking donation supplies. These guys are actually going out to the furthest reaching areas and supplying folks with disinformation and guns also. So I get on this conversation. I actually put it on speakerphone. This was while I was in Floyd. I'm like, listen to this guy, like, oh my God. And, Otis is listening to him, and like, I'm just, I can't believe I'm having this conversation. And he's getting sponsored by Winchester for bullets and ammunition and taking this stuff out because FEMA's going to confiscate all this land and turn it into lithium mines, as it turns out. So he sent me his business card. He wanted to work with me as far as, you know, these aggregation centers, because this was really exciting to him to be able to have a hub to put all this stuff so that he could work out of. You've got other groups like this. So I actually thought this was going to be a great one. These guys have mule teams, supposedly. They were working in Ukraine, supposedly. They go to disaster areas. They were strictly medic, not militant. As it turns out, they weren't doing anything, and they probably were militant. And as word got back to me, and I was actually hoping that these guys would be the nonprofit organization that would be kind of the umbrella to support the infrastructure and the insurance and things like that if I were to secure warehouse space. But as I got talking with them and kind of word got out, like, who are these guys? Like, they're actually not doing anything but taking donations. So you've got the grifter side of things too. And this is a big problem still right now, and they're slowly getting shut down as people kind of figure out their MO. But there's a lot of money that's not going where it's supposed to go in this disaster. So warehouses fell through because of all of that. I couldn't secure a warehouse space that was large enough because a lot of the warehouses in Asheville had been destroyed so much. You know, you got Biltmore Village, which was completely underwater. Ferguson, which is, you know, the plumbing company, they actually ended up taking over that beautiful warehouse that I thought I had secured, and they were paying top dollar for it. And of course, like, they're going to be able to pay that off in 5 years, that brand new building. And that's great. They needed to go somewhere, but like, I'm thinking about this effort and like, how can we secure this material? Well, somebody pointed that I should check out this place in Ashe County, which is right across the border. You can see it's right below Grayson County. It's only 2 hours away. And this is Jimmy and Jean's Family Arcade, which is in West Jefferson. It's 72,000 square feet. This woman named Taylor is this incredible firecracker of a woman who's been there since day one, with the same vision that we need to bring in supplies, and yes, there can be families that come in and actually get donated supplies, but really this is thinking for the long term. She was thinking on the same scale that I was, and this is a little bit of her crew. They have 50 to 100 volunteers every day that come through here and work with them. They run a tight ship. They've got donated clothes, they've got baby stuff, they've got medical supplies, and all the things. They serve hot meals every day, and they're absolutely overwhelmed. You can see the sort of the remnants of the arcade in the background, that they've sort of pushed things through the wall. Lots of unloading. Semi-trucks are showing up about 3 times a day to unload stuff. They're doing it by the seat of their pants. They've got a huge bill every single month just to keep the lights on, and now the heat going, and it's astronomical what they're having. I think it's something like $15,000 a month that they're trying to keep afloat with. And of course, they're not making any business as an arcade. But this place has been deemed the hub of hope because it is the aggregation center for Western North Carolina. She's sending people out to 4 states. Some people are driving 6 hours each way to deliver supplies as they get called in. And it's pretty incredible what she's able to do. So what's happening here is that these smaller hubs, as they start running out of things or as needs change, they call Taylor, and there might be one other one that isn't nearly this big or established, but she will then fill a truck or a box truck or whatever needs to be filled and make sure that all of that material gets to where it needs to go. And things are definitely evolving, you know, as people need more heaters and more propane and less Huggies. A lot of Huggies out there, folks. But there were still all these smaller hubs that didn't have any kind of communication with the larger hubs. And I found once Taylor seemed cool. I was able to donate a bunch of money towards her nonprofit, which she's actually working with a local nonprofit that's able to take the funds and then make sure that they get to the right place. But I went out to check out some of these smaller places and let them know that, like, you're not just going to be getting donated supplies from random trucks that show up. Like, we actually are forming an infrastructure so that these supplies can get there. And this was a big deal. And as I would come to these places, this felt like Little House on the Prairie, where, like, I'd have to come introduce myself, say who I am. I'm not with an organization, but I want to help. What do you need? Write it all down, get back in my car, and go tell, whoever needs to know. But, these people had just established a Starlink here, so they had the internet connection, but they didn't know about the infrastructure. As you can see, a lot of this stuff is outside, and so they needed more tents and tractor trailers actually set up with their box trucks so that we could keep this stuff undercover. So that last one was kind of near the B-Log church that we had set up, but it was further up the mountain and pretty out of the way. By the time I came back to that one, you couldn't even get to B-Log because FEMA had declared the bridges all unsafe, and so those people were stuck and having to get helicopter supplies in. And this was 3 weeks ago. I went down to Fairview, so this is south of Asheville, to this place. This woman, Sam, she and her husband had just moved to the area, bought a small farm, lived in a little camper, and just getting on their feet. He just got out of the Navy, working as a medic. That's their camper. Got washed down. They had to be rescued by boat as this flood was coming through. They both got out safely, and the very next day, she and her husband came up to this church and asked, "Can we use this as a supply hub?" And they agreed, and she's been working tirelessly every single day to make this happen with volunteers, but like with the trauma, with the fact that she could have died. I mean, that's the inside of her trailer. And you hear stories like this of just these people that are just so resolute and so determined to, like, kind of bring an equilibrium back to things, and it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So this is the inside of the parish hall of the church here, totally stocked up. But again, as needs were changing, people weren't coming in to grab these supplies anymore. And culturally, in a lot of these Appalachian towns, people feel too proud, or they feel like they don't deserve these items. These need to go to somebody who must need them more than I do. And so she would actually put together these pallets that she would deliver with heaters in them, grills, food. She'd have stuff in the cooler with ice, and she'd go and she'd park them at the end of a neighborhood right at dusk and leave and come back in the morning, and they'd be gone. All the stuff would be gone because folks did in fact need this stuff, and they would come and they'd check, they'd take it all, and then she'd refill it, and nobody knew who was taking it. And I think having that anonymous feel was comfortable for everybody, and just kind of an interesting cultural boundary to take into consideration with this. So as I'm meeting people and getting all these calls and trying to figure out exactly where I'm fitting in with this, I'm feeling like this is definitely an issue where I need to continue kind of being a networker and not representing one organization, but people. I don't know why. I don't know if it's my Facebook posts or just kind of word getting out of like who's who's the mover and shaker that can actually get things done, and somehow I became that guy. I had a woman reach out to me and said, "Hey, you want to go check out Chimney Rock and Lake Lure? That place was supposedly damaged. They're looking for volunteers. You want to go down there and see what the scene's like?" And I said, "That sounds great." So this was posted just on this North Carolina news site. I looked everywhere else. I couldn't find anything posted on any of the other Facebook groups and whatnot. So Lake Lure, North Carolina is where I grew up going. This was my introduction to Appalachia. My grandparents had a lake house on Lake Lure. Chimney Rock is a gorgeous area. The topography here is nothing like anything in the rest of Appalachia. Beautiful, beautiful area. So really what it is, the Hickory Nut Gorge starts above Bat Cave and comes down with this river, which is called the Broad River, that flows into Lake Lure. And this area was absolutely devastated. You can see here, this was taken off of a map showing kind of the debris flows and how they all sort of congregated right at Bat Cave and then spilled down, blowing out Chimney Rock and flowing into Lake Lure. So I took this picture as I'm looking up at not the damage of the chimney of Chimney Rock. So this is what Chimney Rock looked like in August, right? Remember that mountain right at the top there, because you can see that same mountain. This is from the same vantage point, and this is what it looks like now. It's totally gone. The whole town of Chimney Rock is gone. So standing up sort of at a vantage point and looking around, this is what we've got. A few dwellings left. This river was maybe 15 feet wide before, kind of an afterthought as far as Chimney Rock went. You know, there's the beautiful little town and the mountains you'd look up, and nice little babbling creek there, and it rose 30 feet and took out the whole town because of how all that water and landslide material congregated and came down the area. This is where I'm standing. So you can see this is an elevated parking lot. The road is completely gone. 74A is completely gone there. And actually on that, on this one, you can see what the track hose have been doing to put this river back into its bed, and it looks like Disney World straight line. I mean, nobody's giving any thought to the fact that maybe it should meander a little bit. Not from an artistic perspective, though I'd appreciate that, but more out of practicality. You don't really want this thing to just be a sluice going down the mountain. But that's what we've got right now, and I'm sure nature will correct that over time. So we show up to where these volunteers were, and there were 4 or 5 people there. They were, I'm about to be 50, but these people were over 50 and definitely older, and probably retired. Brought their shovels and their gloves and everything like that. But you could just this place needed volunteers. They needed equipment to come in to demolish a lot of these still standing buildings, and it just wasn't there. And so I was like, I went to the organizer. I was like, hey, can I? I'm not here to volunteer with this project. I'm here to get you volunteers. Can I do that? Is that okay? If I inundated you with people and things, would that be? And she's like, please, this sucks. And she was coming from Florida, and she had her group, and it was a group I had never heard of before, and so I threw it out there on all these networks that I'd suddenly been able to create with people. Hey, come down to Chimney Rock. Y'all want to see something crazy? Bring shovels. You can be a disaster tourist, and you can actually help at the same time. I called the Cajun Navy. I got their track hose to show up, and by that weekend, they had a large presence coming around. So here's Lake Lure before. Nice, quaint, beautiful river to go on. This is what I saw. So this is all silt that came down the mountain. This was the marina. All those boats jumbled together. So this was right at the mouth of where the Broad flows into Lake Lure, and that's Lake Lure. So that's all of Chimney Rock and Lake Lure, and then some. So the next day, I wanted to see Bat Cave and see if they needed any help up there. Supposedly they hadn't been, there's a fire station rescue squad up there that was receiving supplies, and I was going to just kind of assess them, tell them about this place up in West Jefferson, let them know if I could help, and I didn't want to pass this area because of this landslide here. So I turned around and was able to like really kind of drink in what kind of damage was, and this is like at the top of the mountain. This wasn't even like low where these things happen, and this is the kind of destruction. I got out and talked to the guy that owned this car. He had to escape out of the sunroof when the debris flow came through. It actually engulfed his car, and he got out and stayed on top of his car until he felt like he could actually move off of it. But harrowing stories like this. One guy I got to know really well was a medic with a helicopter team, and he was flying around to all the clinics that were being set up to check on them, as they couldn't access anything else. If anyone had any medical needs, he could address that or bring them back. And he told me a story about, so there was this family that their house got caught in a debris flow and totally disappeared. And the grandmother, the grandfather, and the granddaughter got out. The grandmother and grandfather were taking care of their grandkids. The parents were deceased. And they had rescued a dog a couple of weeks before, and the dog found the boy alive. So stories like that, it's beautiful. So here's some hillbilly ingenuity to hold up a bridge. As you can see, these are flatbed tractor trailers, and then you've got segments of them on the side, and somebody came along and welded on railings and everything. I thought that was incredible. And that will work for the time being. So right now, this is what we've got. We've got people living either on their land or on other people's land in tents where their houses used to be. And a lot of people are obviously not wanting to leave their land because FEMA can declare it condemned. But this is all that they have. And FEMA has agreed to pay something like $20,000 per plot of land. It doesn't matter the acreage along the rivers that are totally destroyed. And that's, after, a lot of these people, this was their life savings. This is what they had.
What's that process? How does FEMA come in and declare that there's nobody there?
There's an inspector that shows up, and that's the thing is these people want to stay on the, if they physically leave their land and an inspector shows up, he can condemn it, and it would be illegal for somebody to move back onto it. But there's an application process. I'm not anti-FEMA, they do great things, but there's just a lot of gray area, there's a lot of fog in this. And that's, again, you see the disillusionment, like this is when it's coming out.
That $20,000, is FEMA paying them to leave, or
That's paying them to leave.
Oh, wow.
that's cash out and go?
That's, yeah, and don't come back.
Thought they were broke.
Well, hopefully they're about to get anyway. So a lot of these people are just refusing to leave, and now this is part of the floodplain. If it wasn't before, all it's going to take are a couple of strong rains. And one question was asked on one of the Facebook forums. It was like, I just don't understand, why can't people just rebuild on their land? But like, there's nothing to there's no land to rebuild on, and this isn't a great example of that, but like there's no soil left. You know, it's gone. It's rocks. You can't really do that in these spots. So getting these tiny homes where they need to go is a project I'm working on right now. We've got Amish teams showing up to build these things. We've got the Cajun Navy. We've got other groups. Just contractors are taking a week off, taking their whole crews down here and putting these things together. On the bottom here, we've got something called a hot tent, which is something that you can actually plug a wood stove in and actually have a chimney. It's like an old army tent. These are pretty popular right now just to get people in something other than a camping tent that they might be able to stand up in. But really, it's better to have something insulated and larger. There's a little question right now with building codes as far as what FEMA and the building inspectors will actually allow to go on the land. And that's going to get a lot of pushback as well right now because they're probably not going to declare that a suitable living spot. DSS is getting involved, pulling kids away from families as they're not living in suitable areas. And this isn't conspiracy. This is what is actually happening right now. I mean, you can see here. This is all that this person has is this one little shed that we've been able to place, and I mean that was the house. This is people's realities.
That may or may not suffice for code
Correct.
a month from now.
Correct.
And what are they
Because then
doing
they'll take
for, bathroom necessities?
A lot of them are just, there's a whole world out there for bathrooms. The question was, what are they doing for bathrooms? But yeah, I mean, porta potties have been put in communities, especially in more urban areas. But really, it's just
Right,
dig a hole.
yeah.
So, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that I feel like, I can take away from this, and that we should start these conversations as a community about, first of all, I would love to know what each one of these organizations does during a disaster. Having the communication, like, okay, early on they're like, oh, don't worry, FEMA's going to come and they're going to bring the trailers. Well, that didn't go well during Katrina, as I recall. They were moldy and they weren't suitable, and all these things were promised that then had to be taken back because of health risks. But what will the federal government promise in a disaster like that? Same with the state and the local and the NGOs. What will you guys do? What is your role going to be in this? Just so that we make sure that everything's covered and there can be some accountability if you don't follow through with what you say you're going to do. Because there's a lot of that too, where they're like, oh, FEMA's coming to do this, and then they, well, actually we're not. And all the way down to the churches. Churches are doing amazing work down there. I don't really know how they're able to keep going, but they are. They're feeding people, they're building, they're really tacking into wherever they can and kind of trying to plug all the holes in the boat. But it would just be nice to know what they do, all around. What's your role going to be so that we can make sure that we cover all the floods. And it's just a matter of time before this happens here. And it could be a wildfire. It could be a random tornado or 8 feet of snow that just gets dumped on, like a snow bomb cyclone thing that seem to be happening now. We need to be starting these discussions now as things change for our own community, and maybe be able to include other communities in those discussions, maybe include the whole state, or maybe just include the Appalachian region, because we have something special going on here that it's a recipe that doesn't happen in the rest of the state or in the rest of the country. This was a unique mix of factors that have played into this disaster of Helene in Western North Carolina, up into Virginia, into Tennessee. And so what can we do as our community, as Floyd? That's really my main reason for wanting to share this, is what are the steps that we can do, and not just theoretical stuff, but like actually have some deliverables in place now. Where are we going to source generators when the time comes, or do we go ahead and have a facility set up with generators in them? Potable water. What if our water supply? What if our water table just runs out right now? These old timers that used to have springs feeding their stuff. They're talking about their springs are slowly running dry, and that's a very real problem. Our water here is finite. We don't have water that flows into Floyd County. It all flows out. So we need to make sure that we're not only securing these resources, but paying attention as they become more of a necessity as this town grows. How are we going to handle that infrastructure in a way that's sustainable?
If the power goes out, then your pump doesn't.
Right, sure. Yeah, we saw a lot of that too. So yeah, I think that's it. That's what I got.
So I'm curious about how we start organizing, you as an organizer. How do we start to create the conversation, collect the money to support infrastructure, hire you and pay you to be our organizer? No, I'm dead serious. Like really, like what are the steps that we need? What are the steps we need to
So
take?
those steps are already starting to fall into place right now. There's a group that's being formed specifically on the resilience of Floyd.
Okay.
And as meetings start happening, I can post on those and kind of share the work, because it needs to be a community discussion. I think we all have something to bring to the table. We all come from different backgrounds and different culture, but we live here now and we love it, and we need to make the most of this. And we need to know our neighbors. That was one thing that in Ramsey Town, what this old timer said was he said, a disaster like this, it needed to happen, because now we know our neighbors. There's something to think about.
I'm not from this area. I'm from Nelson County. I'm just up here visiting. We've got involved with a couple of different groups. One of them being called City Elders. It's a Christian conservative group. And what they're trying to do is get folks to engage with local politics, to get the kind of people in place that you want. Because not everybody that's in place, even in the county that I'm in, 4 of the 5 don't represent the views of the general public.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trying to get people engaged. I mean, if you sit back home and you never go to a meeting with the board of super, I don't know how it's set up here in Floyd. We have a board of supervisors. Now, I'm assuming y'all probably have the same thing here. But folks, you need to be engaged. You need to know what's going on in your local areas. You need to know where your representatives stand and if they are lining up with what your belief systems are. Because if you don't, they make decisions for you that you have once they're made, you have no control of what's happening next. And I was curious, did you run into God's crew down there anywhere?
Yes, I've heard of them. I've not spoken with them, but yeah.
The church that I go to has had some folks go in there. I've been involved with a Mennonite group and had gone to Kentucky and West Virginia, and I led a team to Katrina down there when all that took place. But they said that God's Pit Crew was the most organized outfit that they'd ever seen in their life. Every mission trip that I've been on, I had to finance myself. If you get there, they feed you, they house you, they wash your clothes, they provide showers for you, and they've got all the modern equipment and everything. I haven't been yet. I intend on going.
Yeah, I've heard good things for sure.
But it's something, certainly what you're talking about here, and when you're talking about water, and I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm a dealer for a pump company. It's called Simple Pump, and it works it goes right in on top of your well casing, where you can it'll lift up to 330 feet. You can actually get potable water there. My system is a lot more expensive than a system that I've just noticed on Facebook. It's called FlowJack.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if y'all have seen that or not, but water is something you can't do without. You can do with food for a while, but you've got to have a source of water. And there's a lot of stuff going on depends upon what your point of view is. It could be conspiracy theories. Either you're on one side of the fence or the other, or maybe there's three categories. There's some people who believe it's definitely headed our way. There's some people say, well, it may be, and then you've got people who come say, well, everything's going to be the way it's always been. But folks, we're not living in that world today. Things are changing, and if, in fact, the power grid does go down, if you don't have food on hand, if you don't have water, then you're going to be in a world of hurt. And it's going to be, you know, there are a lot of things that said that, you know, over 3/4 of the population would be dead in 18 months if the power grid stayed down that long. That's kind of critical, but most people don't have enough food. They live out of the grocery store. They go to the food line every day, pick up this, that, and the other. They don't have enough food to last for a week. So what you're talking about is very critical, and I think it's eye-opening. And you know, these tragedies don't just happen for no reason. It's a time to open people's eyes as to what can happen. I lived in Nelson County where in '69 we had Camille came through, and it was in no way comparable to what happened in North Carolina, except it was just in little specific areas. I mean, some families, 40 or 50 family members got washed away in one local area, and it was kind of centralized. But we're not isolated. None of us are isolated from tragedy. In the world we're living in, I mean, just like what, these FEMA coming in and trying to take people's land and stuff, if people don't get organized to stop this thing, they're going to run right over those people and take everything they've got.
I think where you ended it is a good beginning, and it's also where you began, which is, hey, let me go down there and get involved. And there's a lot to learn how you can help yourself by helping other people. So now you've got all this experience now. You're talking about that fire chief didn't know what to do, like, or our building code enforcers here, like, could they possibly step in and relieve, some people to give them some?
Yeah, so there was definitely an effort to do that early on. I mean, the North Carolina state government had actually issued a disaster relief team to come in, and he told them to leave after they were they were like, we're not calling the shots, we're just giving suggestions of what you can do, and he didn't want to hear it. So again, that ego in play. So this, at least the area in Ramsey Town, maybe Pensacola too, they're not going to see electricity until March or April right now. Like, that's the estimated time. Because that's how devastated the power lines are. So just thinking about what you said. So,
You mentioned Samaritan's Purse, you saw them, were they pretty active down
yes. Yeah, and tight with really nice equipment. Yeah.
I didn't hear that question.
Samaritan's Purse. Yeah, I was impressed with them for sure.
From what I've heard, Samaritan's Purse and God's Pit Crew have been two of the most organized outfits that have come in there. Well, Franklin's got more resources than God's Pit Crew. They're located, God's Pit Crew's over at Danville, Virginia. But, and they're deploying 3 weeks at a time. They're on their second deployment now. They go in for 3 weeks, and then I don't think they move everything out, but they send their people, the ones that are kind of hanging around full time, home for a couple of weeks so they don't just get burnt out, and then they come back in.
And another challenge is finding places for these organizations to stage their equipment. To be able to have, because a lot of them are coming in with tractor trailers, and they need housing for the people, like you were saying. Helicopter landing pads, like that needs to be established for a lot of these places.
So
Like
where did you sleep when you were working down there?
One of the nurses who was part of this had an extra bed, and so I slept there for 2 weeks, and then the rest of the time I just found places. I had a bed every single night, amazingly. Like, people were offering their stuff. That was nice.
With God's Pit Crew, they were putting them up. Then they had one facility. The first deployment, they had 100 beds inside of a church that they were putting them up in. In the second deployment, I think somewhere in Asheville, they had 60. But I did ask them if they had provisions for campers to come in, and he said they did. So that's
Interesting.
another option.
It seems like like with Katrina, there was a lot of advanced preparation. You know, there was National Guard was brought in ahead of time and all that. And with Asheville, Burnsville, nobody was expecting the devastation to be at that level.
Right.
But now with this experience, it seems like if you saw something like this that looked like it could threaten an area, you could call Occasion Navy ahead of time and all these other groups like the groups international, give them advance warning and then, you know, have some kind of plan in place to call those people in and if,
Sure.
if a disaster.
And maybe that involves going ahead and looking around at our county and kind of establishing, like, you know, this would be a good staging ground. This would be a great helipad.
Yeah.
You know, these places, like, this is where, like, the National Guard could come and, like, just set up. And, you know, we have the wonderful resource of relatively flat land compared to these areas. So it's a lot harder to find those areas, even for camping.
And this is sort of unrelated to that, but what's the potential for like solar ovens and solar, you know, portable solar devices that could be brought in?
Yeah, solar stuff is definitely happening, and actually the Starlinks work really well on some solar generators, so you're not having to run that generator. So we were actually replacing once we'd have things established, we would then trade it out, give that generator to a family, and put in a solar thing that could just run 24/7, and it's quiet and it's amazing.
Just curious, is there anybody here from the Board of Supervisors in Virginia tonight? I know in Nelson County, we don't even, a lot of these smaller communities don't even have an emergency management plan in place. We have them in Nelson County, we're 15,000 people, and they had adopted one from Campbell County, I think, and actually some of the plan actually had Campbell County, which instead of that in Nelson County. And but most of the places don't have any kind of reserve for fuel. They don't have generators on hand. They have no infrastructure really in place. And I mean, I don't know. And Floyd is kind of rural. It would be a good question to ask your county administrator or some of your board of supervisors people.
I've actually just been appointed to a planning commission for kind of the future of Floyd right now. Richard, you're on that as well. And that's through the Board of Supervisors.
Is that
So we're kind of
planning
working
zoning?
it's not really zoning. It's more just
There's no zoning in Floyd County.
yeah. It's just more thinking about future infrastructure, growth, etc. But I plan on kind of putting in my agenda on there.
The county's also going through their comprehensive planning process right now, so everyone who's in this room that isn't aware of that, then please get on Facebook, look at engagenrv.org and get engaged with the comprehensive planning process, because hazard mitigation is a huge part of that, and those are community discussions that are facilitated by local gov. So that's a really good way to get your voice out there as a citizen, to the ears that are leading our communities. So
What was the name of that?
I don't want to monopolize
it's
this.
the Floyd Comprehensive Plan, Floyd County Comprehensive Plan.
No, the Facebook page, man.
Oh yeah, the Facebook page, the Floyd County government Facebook page should post about the comprehensive planning process, but also engagenrv.org, and you can find that there. So.
One of the things that I've been trying to organize in our county, which I've had very little success with, is trying to get town hall meetings going. And it needs to be done in specific areas, because as rural as Floyd is, Nelson is just kind of the same way. People don't show up at the governmental meetings, and so they have no clue as to what's going on. Where with the supervisors, they give you 3 minutes to speak and never answer a question.
Mm-hmm.
So what we were trying to do is trying to organize town hall meetings and invite one or more of the supervisors there and put them in a position where they have to answer questions. And I don't know whether that's a situation here, but planning commission, we do have a planning and zoning in Nelson County. It has absolutely no teeth whatsoever. All they can do is make recommendations, and I've seen them totally decline a motion that would come in there, the board of supervisors would unanimously approve it, and I've seen it go the other way. So I mean, it's crazy how our political systems are set up, but if local people don't get engaged, you're gonna get caught with your pants down, and it's not a good situation.
You know, and there's other factors to really consider too. Like we have the Radford Arsenal right down the road, and you know it's right on the New River. It's one of the biggest polluters in Virginia, and it flooded during Helene as well. And a bunch of barrels of phthalates, which if y'all don't know what phthalates are, look it up. But they are gone. They're missing. And they spilled into the New, and luckily for us, the New flows north. But that means that tons and tons of chemicals, and that's just what, you know, not even talking about the open burn stuff and the, you know, the munitions that they, you know, deal with there. That, you know, there's a higher incidence of thyroid in our area because of the Radford Arsenal, they believe. These are issues that should come up right now as we're starting to talk about our infrastructure. Like, hey, that's right there. These storms are going to happen. We need to start, you know, keeping that on our radar if it's not already. So, I should probably wrap this up.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And I write a bunch of stuff on Facebook. If you haven't looked at it, I could sort of go into depth on a lot of these things. You're welcome to check out David Grimsley on the Facebook. Kind of when things get denied from Floyd Group, I put them on there.
Well, I mean, is that a good group to potentially start?
Yeah, well, now that we have a resilience group, exactly. Yes, Linda?
No, I just wondered, what do you want us to do next? I mean, what's the next step? We're all, a lot of us are ready to do something.
What did our great leader say? He said, stand down and stand by.
We don't want to do that.
I don't know where Hannah went.
No, I'll make sure that I'm vocal about when meetings start happening and gears start turning. Please, yeah. It is. Thank y'all.
It is almost December. See you soon.
Otis, congratulations on your job.
Oh, thank you.
Next time I come to your job, or when you get your license, let's get this. Don't forget my dates. See you guys later. There's the cutie pie.
In the bathroom. Remind Dad of where his phone is.
I know.